Okay, so we finished taking apart the slide and cleaning it and so forth. So now it's time to move on to taking apart the frame. First thing we're going to do is take off the grips, or the grip, both sides of a grip. There are, on this particular version, there's two flathead screws on each side, 4 screws total. So go ahead and take those off. I'm just going ahead and taking off the last screw here. So I got one half the grip and the other half the grip. You can see there's some oily buildup and stuff in there from cleaning it without taking it apart completely in the past. And we're going to end up wiping all this stuff off inside here, before we reassemble it. But for now, we're going to set the grip panels off to the side there. We're going to remove the takedown lever next. And you rotate it up, and you kind of push the takedown lever like so. And then you'll meet some resistance on the way out, because there is a spring on this side as well that's holding it. And the takedown lever comes off like so. So set that off to the side. And then we can take what Sig calls the lock block. And there's a spring in here too, which we got to be aware of. You can see the orientation of the spring. This is your slide release spring. Next we have to remove the trigger spring. So we'll go ahead and do that. Like so. Just be aware of the orientation of all of your springs. Got that spring out. Now our trigger is nice and free. Should be able to drive this pin out. In fact, it actually slid out pretty easily. That's the trigger pivot pin. We're going to set that off to the side. Now our trigger is pretty well loose inside of here. See if we can slide it out. Like so. Just going to lay this in the orientation of which it's supposed to be. Kind of sits like so inside of the pistol. So we're going to lay that off to the side. I'm going to clean all these parts off. You can see they're pretty dirty. My fingers are getting pretty dirty here. Then we got the slide release. We're there at this point. Going to also take off our decocker as well. There's a spring there, which we can get underneath there and unhook it. And that spring basically just lifted up on the one end and pulled it out. Okay, that spring's free. Set that off to the side. Decocker lever should come off like so. And we'll set that off to the side. And we got this little plate here. So next we're going to work on removing this hammer spring. Got to remove this retainer that retains this hammer spring first. It kind of slides up towards the back of the grip and then out. So you want to also be careful that this doesn't go flying across the room or anything like that. And maybe not be a bad idea to wear a pair of safety glasses so you don't get a spring in your eye or something. So basically we're going to have to push this thing down, and it's going to be very difficult, so we'll see. Push it down like so. The screwdriver, that actually worked pretty well with this small tip. Kind of fit right into that slot right there. There's a slot, it might be kind of hard to see, right in the center of this little block. And it's actually, I think this is plastic here, yeah it is. Then we got to remove the hammer spring, which will kind of keep the orientation of these parts. So we'll set that off to the side. Next we got this link here that basically the hammer spring rides on it, and it pushes up against the hammer on top there. So now that we've got most everything apart here except for the hammer and this little guide right here. See that? It's actually two pins, a pin over here and a pin on this side as well. I believe both those are going to have to come out in order to get this hammer out so we can clean everything inside of there. So I'm just going to try to drive this one out. Didn't take much effort at all. It's only part way out. I don't think we're going to have to remove this pin that's right in here, because it looks like this will slide off once we have this spring and retainer or whatever it is out of the way. So we got to finish driving that roll pin out the rest of the way. I may actually put this underneath a piece of tape so I have a place to catch that. Alright, very good. So we got the other pin out, and the spring just popped out on me, so I was able to catch it. Can always be careful with these springs. I'm going to set that off to the side. And able to slide this little guide out. I don't remember what the technical name for it is. And they also had a couple other little pieces that came out here. And then, of course, our hammer's out. So we'll have to go ahead and, after we clean everything, figure out how it all goes back together. And I see there's one other spring and another pin back here too. It's down in the back here. There's a little pin. You can see it on both sides. Kind of right there. And you can see the spring. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, right down inside there. It's kind of hard to see. That I'm going to leave in. I don't think there's any real strong reason to pull that out at this time. For cleaning it and everything, but basically you have to drive that pin out, looks like. And I'm also not going to remove the mag release either, because I don't really see a need to remove that at this point either. So we're going to go ahead and clean off this frame, and by spraying some of the Hornady one-shot, cleaner on it. It's pretty dirty inside, so I'm going to kind of spray it all down. I know there might be stuff that some like better than this. I kind of like the Hornady one-shot because it does kind of dry pretty well. It doesn't leave all that oily residue and stuff after it's kind of set. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of scrub down the inside of this and go ahead and clean up all the crevices. Use some of these Q-tips and stuff to get in all the little tight spots, kind of wipe everything down. So the frame's all cleaned up, and we're going to set it off to the side over here. And next we're going to work on cleaning up all these little subcomponents here that are on our bench. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of cleaning them, but just to give you a basic overview of what I'm going to be doing. Each one of these things I'm going to be spraying off with the Hornady one-shot cleaner, and just scrubbing them down and wiping them down with super soft microfiber towel if I need to, or if there's a little crevice on something, I'll be using Q-tips to clean it. As you saw earlier, if you watched the slide video, I think I had this in there, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now and get all these parts cleaned up, and then we'll come back and we're going to go ahead and start reassembling everything. So I went through and I cleaned all these little pieces and everything that go inside the frame, including wiped down the grips on the inside and everything. This is where a ultrasonic cleaner would come in handy. I wouldn't recommend using an ultrasonic cleaner for dipping the whole gun into it, but if you're taking it apart and disassembling it like this, it'd be nice to just take all these little pieces, put them in the tray, throw them in the sonic cleaner for a while, pull them out, have them all nice and clean, just dry them off and everything real good, and lubricate them, and they're good to go. Saves a lot of time. You don't have to, a lot of tedious time of cleaning all these little parts. So that's why I didn't want to film all that, because it takes a while to do it. So anyhow, we're going to work on reassembling the frame here. we're going to start working on putting the hammer assembly back in. And so going to drop that in there. Okay, so I went ahead and put the hammer in place here and dropped in the pin for it. Pin's, in there kind of loose. That's how it is right now. And then next we're going to work on assembling these other pieces here that we took off earlier. Okay, so I put a little bit of lube on the slide block. We're going to go ahead and slide that in. Kind of goes down at an angle. And one of the things we want to make sure of too is that we have that pivot pin for our trigger pin in the right direction. I believe those notches are going to face upward. Okay, so you kind of slip that block in kind of at an angle and kind of work it in there. So that you got the slide release spring on top there. And next we're going to go ahead and put this takedown pin back in. And I'm going to put a little bit of grease on there as well. Now there is that spring that's inside there that kind of acts like a detent so this takedown lever doesn't come off. When you put it in this way, you can kind of rotate it slightly. I don't know if you can see that inside there. Try to get it up a little closer. It's kind of hard to pick up on. Kind of see my fingers inside there. Well, the spring, there's a little notch. I don't know if you can pick up on this or not. There is a little notch on the edge of this takedown pin. And that notch is just right for grabbing on top of that spring. And once you're on top of that spring, if you rotate it, rotate the takedown slightly, you can get it past the spring, just like so. And so on. So, kind of do the same thing, get it in the rest of the way. Now we've got the takedown in place. And in fact, once you do that, it makes this spring a little bit tighter on the slide release lever. Now, basically have to put our grips back on, which is pretty easy to do. One thing I'd recommend is putting a little drop of Loctite on the screws so they don't come loose. It looks like there's a little bit from the factory. It's kind of hard to pick up on that, but there is a little bit of red on that threads there. Alright, now that we've got some thread locker on there, we'll go ahead and reinstall our grips. Okay, so we got both the grip panels back on and reinstalled and everything properly. When you're tightening up these screws, don't over tighten them. You don't want to crack the plastic on the grip, and you don't want to pull the threads out on the frame. Once you do that, yeah, there may be a method to repair that, but why would you want to go through the trouble of having to repair the frame of your pistol? Just don't over tighten these. You want them nice and snug, nice and tight enough that the grips aren't going to come off, the screws aren't going to come loose, stuff like that. Okay, if you're watching the first part of the video, we took apart the slide assembly, other than the sights, and cleaned and lubricated everything on the slide assembly. And now, on this second part here, we just took apart the pistol frame and cleaned and lubricated everything on the pistol frame, with the exception of the magazine release and the hammer reset spring assembly. Now I've got a couple more things that I do usually right before I'm totally done putting this back together. And the first one's going to be putting a little lubrication on the slide here, or the sliding areas on the frame. Like just run a little tiny bit on here on both sides. Especially anywhere that you see a little bit of a shiny spot, because that's going to be some place where there's wear occurring. So go ahead and I'll kind of wipe that off with a Q-tip a little bit, kind of get it in there, just to put a real thin coat on everything and not make a big mess. That's just one of my methods of doing that. So could also do that on the slide too, actually. Just run a little bit down in the channel here. And we'll go ahead and kind of wipe off some of the excess on that as well. Alright, so we're going to put the slide back onto the frame here. I'm going to slide it back, engage the slide release, flip the takedown lever there. I'm going to release the slide, make sure our decocker is working properly, and it is. Test it again. Nice and free there. Okay, so if I've taken a pistol this far apart, one of the things I like to do is test out the firing pin before putting snap caps in it or taking it to the range or anything like that. And one of the ways I found to do that is by using a pen. It's an easy way to know that the firing pin is actually moving. It can't be just any pen. This style pen doesn't work. You have to have something like a Bic pen. You know, you can actually kind of see where I tested it once with a little dot on the head, on the back cap there of this pen, where it contacted it. So Bic pens work really good for this. You'll see it launch it, so we know that firing pin's working. Works pretty nice. Anyhow, there's just one quick way to bench test the firing pin. Don't go shooting people with a real gun with a Bic pen. Very bad idea. I don't recommend it. But to test the firing pin out, you know, after you've made sure that it was clear and there's no ammunition in the firearm and so forth, you know, then put the pen in there and you could try that out. Just one thought on how to do that. So there you have it, guys. That's the total you know, disassembly and reassembly of the P226. The only thing we didn't cover was the magazine. That's a pretty standard thing. You'll find lots of videos on how to take magazines apart, so I won't bother with that right now. But anyhow, that's it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, have fun shooting.